Hey, Craig. It shows you're muted, Craig, if you can find your mute button there.
Eventually, I'll find it.
There we go. We got you.
Well, you take a shower for your bowl session, but never for mine.
Who are you talking to there, Megan? Who are you talking smack to, me?
Yes.
No, I didn't.
Holly thought it was her.
I did. I was like, gosh, do I look that bad all the time?
But thank you, Megan. I'm glad it looked that good. Or clean, at least.
Yes.
Well, we're still admitting a few, so we'll give it a few more minutes here before we get started.
Yeah.
For those of you just logging on, if you can hear me, we're welcoming a few more people in, so we get started in just a few minutes. Hang in there. Peter, can you hear me all right?
I can, if you're talking to me.
Yes. And Big Sky Watershed Corps, is that what it said?
That is what it said. I'm a Big Sky Watershed Corps with Montana Audubon, and Andrew connected me with this meeting.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you. And I think we might also be joined by Amy Seaman from Montana Audubon too, Director of Policy and Bird Conservation Science.
Amy, I see your name on there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I am here. I'm just finishing some stuff up for sure. Same with Peter with connecting here through Andrew.
Excellent. Good to have you, Amy.
Yeah,
And then-
appreciate it.
And then there's a Matt Klindworth. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, welcome, Matt.
Thanks.
And Jim Spinner, you there?
Yes, sir. Hear you loud and clear.
Good evening, Jim. And hey, Bill Milton.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here.
All right, good. Well, it's a few minutes after 7, so we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Mayhus, and I work for Western Sustainability Exchange, and we've been having these these kind of impromptu monthly calls to get folks together to talk about the current things that are on their mind, challenges, issues, best practices, and it's been really successful. So I will turn it over to Holly Stoltz, who has just joined our staff. Her and her husband ranch up by Valier. And Holly, why don't you go ahead and take it over?
Take it over. Okay. Well, I'm happy everybody could show up this evening on this, well, for the most part of the state, I think a wet evening, thank goodness. But like I said earlier, if that's what it takes to get it to rain, we'll talk about drought every time. So we are joined here with Connie and can't remember, Connie French, right?
And
Yep, and Greg.
And Greg, hello, okay. Yes, there you are. And Wyatt is also going to talk about their drought plan. And let me see, is anybody else on there that we were hoping would be?
So far, that's it that we had, that I had talked to in advance. So.
Okay, well then those two people are on. So we're hoping that they can help us all maybe kind of understand why we do drought plans and what kind of their drought plans look like and how they've had to utilize them in the past and hopefully will not have to use them this year. So I guess if that's okay, we can turn it over to one of them and let them roll and go from there.
Yeah, Wyatt, do you want to go ahead and kick us off? Oh, you're muted, Wyatt.
Yeah, there we are. That should be better. Yeah, well, it's fun being on this, and thanks for having me, and be fun to learn from everybody on here. Should be some good ideas. You know, I guess my initial thoughts on drought is it's a really complex issue because it's a part of our overall ranch management, and there's so many working parts at play there, and every ranch is just so unique in its resource set. And so I think, you know, to have a drought plan really requires it just being part of an overall management plan, really. You know, I think you have to really look at things like what all your resources are. You know, we've got grass resources, we've got cattle, we've got human resources, we've got financial resources, and they're all at play when we are managing through a good year or a dry year. And how we manage those things on any given year can really vary depending on a lot of different conditions. So I think just doing an honest appraisal of where every operation, where your particular operation is at with regards to all of those resources is a good place to start. And then, you know, when we kind of start looking at how can we structure ourselves so we're the most resilient that we can be when drought comes, we kind of start looking at our livestock classes and, you know, how we stock a ranch with cattle. It depends on a lot of factors, and drought is certainly one of them. So like here in Melville on our home ranch, we run primarily cow, calf, and then stockers. And so we try to have a certain component of our ranch that are going to be grazed with stockers because they're kind of our easiest ones to sell. You know, we always know what they're worth and they're easy to handle. And so, you know, we'll kind of look at all of our different classes of livestock, and then we'll just kind of we'll rank them. And, you know, with ones that are going to be sold first, to the ones that we're wanting to kind of hold on to as long as possible. And so I think when we're looking at drought planning, every ranch is different, and some ranches are much more prone to severe drought than others. I think here in Melville, we're definitely prone to drought, but compared to maybe a place in eastern Montana, we're not so much. And so our stocking rate might not have to fluctuate as much as a ranch in eastern Montana might. So if we look at do the amount of grass that is going to be grazed by our cattle that are liquid, that are easily sold, do those two percentages kind of match up? So if we're likely to have to destock by 30 or 40%, then we should probably have 30 or 40% of our grass stocked by cattle that are pretty easily sold. And so we might adjust our stocking rates or our classes of livestock based on that. I don't know if anybody's got any comments or ideas or suggestions, feel free to just jump in, because I'm just going to kind of shoot all over the place on this. So feel free to interrupt me if you've got something you want to add. Bill?
So Wyatt, with understanding the history of your place, how do you determine that percent class of yearlings to pairs? And is that also affected by the fact that you lease other grass for pairs?
It is. Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, the fact that we've got other ranches that we lease does somewhat affect what we can run here in Melville. And so, that's where we kind of just quantifying all of our resources. If we've got this grass here that, and there's certain places that we only run stockers on, and there's some places we run both cows and yearlings on. But pretty much all of those ranches that we run cattle on are also part of a larger management plan for that specific ranch too. Some of those ranches, our cattle aren't the only cattle on those ranches either. So we've got to work with those people and to kind of decide which cattle are going to go first. And a lot of times that'll be our stocker cattle would be the ones that might go first. So we have to have a plan that can kind of accommodate that.
So Wyatt,
Yeah.
do you have like a certain date where you start looking at the weather? We just had a gentleman from Winnett actually call us, and it was like a month ago, and was like, we were running out of grass. Is there any way, do you guys know anybody who has pasture? So he was, a month ago already looking at decreasing his cattle herd. So do you have like a date where you that's kind of where you start?
Well, and it depends on the ranch, but I mean, like here in Melville, we're grazing cows out all year. And so we're kind of constantly looking at the weather and, looking at when we had, significant precipitation last and what the subsoil moisture is like and things like that. So, I mean, there are some kind of key dates, and I guess as we kind of work through a drought plan, so to speak, we kind of classify our livestock, but then there's certain things we can do when we have to start executing on that plan, when we are, we're seeing things out there that, are not going to allow us to probably run as many as we'd like, or for the length of time that we'd like. And so, we're still grazing with our cow herd, we're still grazing last year's growth. But so 1 year kind of, it's not just cut off, like we've got a grazing season and a non-grazing season. I mean, some ranches are just grazed in the summer, and that's kind of how they operate, and you're a little more year to year there. But our grazing seasons kind of more overlap, and especially this time of year, we're kind of getting that, new growth, and we're still grazing a lot of residual grass though too. But I think, like for Melville, May 1st to 10th is a pretty critical time to assess where we're at, and we might decide to maybe turn out less yearling cattle than we were planning on, and that's certainly a consideration for us right now. Actually, we're pretty confident that we're going to be turning out less yearlings than we planned on, just based on how things look. And then I would say for us on this place, June 15th is a pretty critical date or thereabouts, because we've realistically, we're only growing a significant amount of grass for 45 to 60 days with the amount of cool season grasses that we've got. And so, that June 15th, we've grazed through a lot of pastures because we're moving really quickly that time of year. And we can kind of look at the pastures that we've already grazed and see what the regrowth is going to be like. A lot of the ground that we're grazing in the summer is either like a lot of introduced species that we'll try to graze twice a year if it's possible. And so our big determination is when and it's usually around, sometime in June, but when have we kind of grown most of the grass that we're going to grow, and when do we need to make that determination of we just need to go out and assess how much grass we think we have, and we're just from then on just rationing the grass that we've got. And so we need to build an updated grazing plan that's just dependent upon the grass that we see out there at that point. And that that grass has basically got to last us until the next, generally May 1st or thereabouts. And so it's and then if we get some significant rainfall after that, we will get some growth, but a lot of those cool season grasses, you won't, even if you get decent moisture. So then, those are two pretty critical dates for us. I think another a good date for us to really assess how things are looking is after we ship our yearlings, because that's a big chunk of cattle that are no longer there, and on a normal year that would be sometime in early September that we would kind of be able to do another assessment of how much moisture we got for the late summer, and did we get any significant regrowth. Are there some pastures that we feel comfortable maybe grazing a little more than we thought we could, or maybe less. Maybe we just didn't get anything from June 15th then on, and we've got to make another cut, and that would probably be deciding when we're going to wean our calves. And we might look at early weaning at that point if it's looking drier than we thought. So then you go, another critical date would be, whenever we do decide to wean our calves, that's kind of another time for us to assess, okay, we've got the calves gone, maybe they're still on the ranch, maybe not, depending on what our hay situation is or market prices or something like that. But it's just another opportunity to assess grass kind of going into the winter with just your cows, and rationing that grass from then on. And then another time to make another cut on cattle would be at preg testing, and we could cull a little harder on cows if it was still looking, even drier yet, and we needed to cut back more. We can cut back more at preg test, and then do another assessment of, how did that grass from weaning to preg testing hold up for us? Did it hold up better or worse than we thought? And so those are all kind of good opportunities to really look at our grass situation. I would say, we measure how much we've grazed in a pasture with stock days. And so I don't know, I think probably everybody on this call is fairly familiar with stock days rather than AUMs, but it's just a little more of just kind of based on animal weight. And so we feel that that's a pretty decent way to do it. And we do stock days per acre per pasture grazed. And so we kind of, as the years have gone on, we kind of know how different pastures have held up over the years, in drier years and wetter years, and kind of what our tolerances might be for grazing. But a lot of what we do is, we'll know, okay, we took 18 stock days per acre off of this pasture this year, and then we'll go out and look at it and eyeball it and see how does that look. But I think one thing that we could do a lot better a job on is doing a little bit more of a maybe more of a scientific. We just kind of eyeball it a lot with our grass, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably have a lot better idea of maybe biodiversity, and we don't really have a good idea one year to another if we're getting different species coming on or not, other than just kind of what we see with our eyes.
That's the art part of grazing, right? Being a grazing manager.
Yeah.
There's an art to it, and that would be the eyeballing part, I think.
Yeah, I think it's definitely as much art as it is science. And it's that's the fun part.
I have a quick question for you, Wyatt. So once you've made the decision that it looks like things are going to be dry and you're in a drought, do you change any of your grazing strategies? Do you combine herds, move more quickly, anything like that? And then also watering sources. Do you do anything different with your watering sources?
Yeah, those are good questions. Yeah. So here in Melville, we're not with water anyways. We're not very reliant. We've got pretty stable water, whether it's dry or a good year. We don't have many reservoirs that we rely on. So most of our water is either, kind of on the west half of our ranch would be live creek or ditch water. And then on the east side and north part of our ranch would be more tanks and pipelines off of wells. And so we've done a lot of water development with the pipelines and tanks over the years. That's helped out a lot with that. But I think the strategies, they do change, and the combining herds, or maybe if we decide that it's, well, like this year, for example, we're pretty certain that one of our yearling rotations is just not going to be grazed by that group of yearlings. So those yearlings are going to go somewhere else, and that'll open up those pastures for another group of cattle that we were already planning on having on the ranch. So we basically just opened up more pastures for the cattle that were there. So we just kind of subtracted a herd, actually, which but we will at times combine a herd also. That's something that we do. It's not like a written down part of our drought plan by any means, but it's certainly something that's on the table if it makes sense at any given time.
So Connie and Craig, you're in Eastern Montana, right? So have you guys had a lot of moisture, or are you kind of, yeah. What's your big drought plan out there?
The destocking thing actually started in January for us. We took a look at what we came off of from in 20 with hoppers and the lack of, that's the drought. You know, you can measure drought easy enough, but there's no hopper status that you throw those in on top of things and they just defoliate things so much quicker. But we saw that we were going to have a hard time having enough for our stockers. And like Wyatt said, they're the easiest animal to let go. And we made the decision to sell them in January. We're program cattle, so we still were under certification. We didn't have to get another audit. And just so happened people were making program cattle in January. We did all right. But anyway, that's the first thing. And a lot of what Wyatt said is pretty similar. I'm an observational guy, not a number crunching scientific guy, so I can relate to the fun part of it. I have a theory when it comes to drought as far as something growing into money. I've heard that, you know, all you got to do is get these replacement heifers and grow them up into money. But in my opinion, nothing grows into money when you're eating the food away from animals you intend to keep. So in a drought, you better start making that decision to keep your factory as much as possible. So yeah, anytime you eat that grass, that's just hay you might have to feed that much quicker.
But at the same time, you know, when you say don't to keep your factory, but don't be afraid to destock even some of your mama cows. I mean, we've thought about it and talked about it, and if it got really bad, we wouldn't be afraid to sell everything. We've had, I don't know, enough experience, but we've run stockers enough to know that wouldn't be a difficult thing. Say it got dry enough and we had to destock our entire herd. Down the road, we could still be in business. We feel like with stockers, we could switch to that and still stay afloat. So yes, protect your factory, but at the same time, protect your land. You know, that grass that you've got, you don't want to graze it so hard that you're hurting your resource. That's a more important resource than your mama cows.
Hey, Craig and Connie, I wanted to ask you really quick. Wyatt mentioned the stuff that they have in writing, and I know that's a big ranching for profit principle. So we'll get back to Wyatt. I did want to ask you about yours, but since you guys are up, what do you have? Do you have anything in writing, and what do you have in writing versus what is kind of the creative artistic part, and how does that change over time?
No, we don't. Well, we know we should. We know we're like Wyatt was answering the question about the dates or talking about the dates. You know, yeah, there's some key dates, but it's such a fluid thing. You know, you're always looking at last year and you're looking at so many different things that date changes. You know, if you feel like you've got a lot of stockpiled grass on hand, maybe it's not so critical that you get rain or you get those winter snows. Maybe you can make it a little further and wait for those spring rains. So no, we don't have a written out drought plan, and we don't have those hard and fast dates either. And I know it's a ranching for profit thing, and that's just something we never got done. So
No hard and fast dates, but there is some rules of thumb I go by. In our area here, the month of May is huge. That's when our natives really kick in, if the moisture is there and the warmth usually is. So if we have submoisture or the rains come, we really try to be on tame grasses in May and let them natives take off. So here we are, we're pushing May, and we are continuing to slide in a more severe stage of drought. If you watch that drought monitor, the darker color is getting closer to us. And so we're So maybe not a specific date, but there is a specific month or so, because I've got proven wrong in June of 19. It started to rain like the third week in June, and just we grew all kinds of feed. I was amazed. Usually that doesn't happen. So I got a C in college in statistics, but I do kind of use that stuff. The probability of something happening is less and less the farther into this spring and on into summer that we go. So so no specific date, but knowing that May is extremely critical where we're at. And as far as what we're doing now, we're similar to Wyatt. We're grazing 20s holdover, given our crested time to reach that 3 to 4 leaf stage. We're hoping we will here the 1st of May. We'll cycle through that. We do have pipelines and tanks to get through that. And then we do have some ponded water will go afterwards. So we can shake and rattle for a while, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if that made any sense.
One of the things I guess we've been talking about too is changing our grazing rotation, because reservoirs are getting low, and we do depend a lot on pits and reservoirs. And so the ones that are getting, the pastures that have reservoirs and pits that are getting low, we're trying to graze those earlier rather than later while we still have a water source in those areas. And also we have some nasty water up here, and some of our water gets pretty high in sulfates, and then we run into issues with that. So that's another issue that we are starting to look at our grazing plan again, because we're not getting moisture. We're thinking to refresh those water sources. So we're going to try to get to those water sources sooner rather than later, while that water is still good, while we can still use it.
Well, I appreciate your honesty there. I've been to Ranching for Profit a few times too, and it's always easy to say, yeah, just put it in writing. But that was one of the questions that I really wanted to pose of everyone is, okay, but what do you put in writing? And what do you need to not put in writing, because it needs to be flexible? So I think that's a really interesting question. So Wyatt, I'll pose that to you. You know, you've got a large family operation involving numerous people. If you didn't have something in writing or have regular meetings so everybody knew kind of what the group was supposed to be thinking about, that communication would be really important. So I'll throw that question to you.
Yeah. Well, we've got a little bit in writing, but it's mostly, I mean, I think what Bill's laughing. What we spend the most time on is figuring out maybe what our enterprise mix is and really think about what our situation is. But I think Craig and Connie brought up a really good point. I mean, every drought is completely unique, and you can have years where you're below average on moisture enough to where it would be considered a drought, but maybe you had a good grass year last year, and you can kind of work off of residual, or you can have the flip side where maybe you've got a year that it looks like it's pretty close to average, but the grasshoppers were a killer last year, and so that makes your situation just a little bit more perilous than what the precip would actually tell you. And so I think we can write things down and we can structure our business to where we think it's resilient, but when it comes time to actually execute it, I think it's more art than science also. And it's not like we just go through this very systematic approach and it's just checking off our list, because I think every drought that I've been a part of managing our way through, there's always something about our position that I'm not very comfortable with, whether it's our enterprise mix or, cash flow situations or where the market is relative to the class of cattle that we've got to sell. We've got some issues this year that are creating a challenge for what we would normally do with a drought plan, just the way the market's structured. And so there's just a whole, every year there's a whole kind of set of circumstances that are a little bit different, and you just kind of got to work your way through it. I think the communication part of it is key for us, just kind of continually meeting and talking, and it's really easy when you start running into challenges, whether it's drought or anything else, but to just kind of hunker down and for us to just continue to talk about it and work our way through it is an important part of what we do, I think, because everybody's got a little different vantage point and sees things that maybe the person that's directly managing it isn't really seeing. And those things can kind of, it's good for us to have several people looking at things. So I think the communication is really important. But yeah, a formal written up drought plan for us with a series of check boxes is not what we've got either. We could be a lot more organized about it probably, but I think we do. We kind of wing it a lot of times too. Bill, what's your drought plan look like?
Just because I was laughing, you're going to put me on the spot. No, I really appreciate what both the Frenches and you have said. I think that's all really pragmatic, practical, adaptive, flexible advice. And your thing, every drought's different. We go back to the late 90s and early 2000. Most of us destocked. I know we were almost out by the end of that drought. We were out of it. I mean, we didn't have anything. And we tried to sell things at certain times to, keep our financial situation stable. And then, we might have made I think we look back and made maybe not the best decisions on how quickly we restocked. But I mean, that was an 8-year drought, and it just kept, and so I'm always curious how you develop partnerships with people in different regions, so that you don't have all your eggs in one region that's in drought, and you can't go anywhere else. For instance, so we do run our yearlings in Wyoming. Now last year Wyoming had a terrible drought, and we had to send our yearlings to the feedlot because we're part of a co-op that's actually, we retain ownership. So, but that is a pretty great drought plan, is to have a place to exit with yearlings into a feedlot with a stable price. Of course, with CNV, we have a stable price for what those animals are going to bring. So it might cost a little more, but at least if I got to leave in July or August, or can go my normal time in September, October, it's always nice to know where you might go with these animals. So in our situation, being part of that co-op creates some risk mitigation that others that were in the marketplace might not have. For us, when I think about drought, this is a multi-year strategy, and we don't have a specific written plan. We've done one, but like for instance, so in the last 10 days, we've gotten about 1/2 inch of rain. That's not a whole lot of rain, but it's actually a lot of rain. Because if you have a lot of old feed, which we plan for, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that, there's a remarkable amount of feed you can grow if you have some pretty good residual feed that you've saved to go in, like for calving. I think we, probably got enough with that 1/2 inch to grow feed, unless it were get hot and windy for another, 10, 12 days. Then we might get another 1/4 inch or another 1/2 inch. I always look at that 45 to 60 days that Wyatt talks about is how many of those days can we not stop? You know, we just get enough moisture to just not stop that grass and have to start it up again. So to me, the key to kind of doing that is in our rotation, and I kind of envy, well, I don't know if I envy, we choose to send yearlings off the place and run pairs at the ranch and try and maintain one or at the very most two groups of cattle. And that would be our 2-year-olds and then our main mob. But the way we develop our rotation, we calve in a rotation of like 4-year cycles. So we're grazing the land that we're going to calve in next season right now. And so we're intentionally trying to get really good impact in litter development and moving pretty fast to create the most ideal conditions for that unit to grow in the coming season. Because and then we're sort of out of that by early mid-May, but the big part of it we've been out about, because April's really a short growing period. So you can do a lot of stuff in April and not really hurt your grass, as long as you got a little bit underneath there and some old feed. So we're already planning for where we're going to calve next year by what we're doing right now with our cattle. Now we have probably 3 months of old feed, residual feed in front of us where our cows will be going, and they're just starting to calve now. And I was just walking through part of that today, and there's just a lot of nice green growth, even though we've maybe only had a half an inch of rain over the last 3 months. There's good moisture, and there you go, saving some of that old feed and capturing that moisture during the winter or even last year. It's back to this, you're making decisions almost multi-years in advance to be able to prepare yourself to do risk mitigation when the drought actually hits. So we're actually surprisingly having now that temperature warmed up a little, pretty good growth on those residual places. And let's say we weren't, but we had that residual, you could still use targeted protein because you got that forage there, you got that main energy base there. And we might use that, a few weeks before the breeding season, depending on what's happening. But to me, just how we graze and how we capture water and how we develop our rotation is like what Wyatt was saying, and Connie and Craig too, is that you're always planning almost 2 or 3 years, at least we are 2 or 3 years down the road. And then there's all these other dynamic factors that I can't write into a drought plan. Another thing that no one's really talked about, and I think Wyatt has it, but drought insurance. I'm surprised how some people have used to subsidize federal drought insurance to pretty great effect. And so we struggled making that investment 3 years ago, and we just hardly broke even, if not lost some of our premium. But most people who I asked about how that's worked and who are pretty good at using that program have done pretty well with that program in terms of at least getting some financial resources. If everything goes to hell, you can get a pretty good return. So, we're paying close to $20,000 a year on a drought insurance program. We also enroll in the FSA one that, depending on what the government decides on that one, there could be a lot of money or not many money at all, but that doesn't cost much. This other one costs a little bit, and $20,000 is $20,000, and we pretty well have gotten that premium back last year. And if it were just to turn off and dry for the next 2 or 3 months, at least we'd be getting some resources. So that's a form of risk mitigation that has nothing to do with particularly grazing management or targeting sales of cattle and things like that. But it's an important piece. And then, people talked about water development. We've spent years developing pipelines and still need to trying to redo a very old pipeline that's really expensive right now. But that's probably going to be a 4 or 5 year plan. But John, if you can't deliver water, it doesn't matter how much grass you have, you're done. So again, that is not something you can do in a drought plan in 2021. I mean, that's something we invested in 30 years ago. So I guess like right now, you know, we have an apprentice through the Quivira Coalition, and that lady who's really good allows us to do a lot more intensive grazing that I probably wouldn't have time if I was doing it on my own. So every day we're looking, okay, let's move let's just move these 400 cows onto 20 acres every day, and then just watch them and just spend more time in the day just watching these cattle and making sure they're full, and trying to get that sweet spot of the most impact we can get while still not sacrificing performance. Now, almost everybody tells me, and they're probably right, that we move pretty fast when we're calving. And I do think we don't have any health problems, but I do think we probably affect some performance moving often. But we try and do it with good stockmanship skills and try to be really relaxed. But nevertheless, these calves are just every day floating along the landscape, you know, using temporary fence. So now if I just slowed them down a lot, it'd probably be a little bit easier on the calves. And so I'm weighing, gee, calf performance, if they're healthy and I can get a weaned calf, but I can manage for grass, I'm prepared to sacrifice a little performance as long as it's not creating health problems, you know. So maybe I'll get a lighter calf, but I'll have enough grass for the cows I do have. I don't know. So those are some of the, you know, ideas in terms of those trigger dates that Wyatt was talking about. I think they're all pretty solid places to take a look at what you have now. So we don't run yearlings here at the ranch. So you know, we can put ourselves in kind of a tricky spot where we might be finding ourselves selling some of the cows. But as Connie said, you know, you can't sacrifice your cows. I mean, you can't sacrifice your grass for your cows, you know, and you just, hopefully you got enough reserves when you do that. And again, partners, is there someone who would really like your cows that you could be talking to right now and saying, yeah, you know, if you end up in a situation, maybe I'll do something with that. So I really appreciate having a lot of other people to talk to and work with. And then, you know, we don't feed a lot, but we have multiple people we buy hay from, because some years the people we buy hay from might get hailed out, or they might have a drought, or something might happen. And so we have 5 or 6 people we need to buy hay from, because we supplement our cattle with high protein hay in the winter, you know, at 4 or 5, 6 pounds a day. Well, I got to find that feed. And I like knowing I have people out there I can trust that I can call like this month and say, so, you know, I'm going to need at least this much unless something really goes off the wall, and know that I can trust those people to come up with a pretty good, the kind of whatever targeted supplement we have. So I think people are right. And I think, you know, despite the science, I think monitoring is really important. So we have someone who does third-party monitoring, and I really appreciate that person's opinion to help us think through our grazing plan. And this person monitors Roland Cruz and a number of the ranches through the West. So he's going to bring some expertise about what other people are doing and what he sees in our place. And then we've hired Rick Coughlin. A lot of people here know Rick, you know, retired NRCS guy. You know, we're paying him a little bit this year to do these GAN samples to just help us. I'm just getting another set of eyes telling us what our condition is of our cows. And then so he's going to visit our places 3 times, and he's just a great person to kind of bounce ideas off. And so I get confidence relying on other people and not just ourselves to like hold us accountable to how we're judging the situation. So yeah, yeah, Wyatt, that's the best I could offer right now.
So Alex Blake had to step away, but his question is, does anyone think about drought as an opportunity or have a story of a positive outcome from managing through drought? Anybody?
I think it can be an opportunity. I mean, anything can be an opportunity. You just try to keep your eyes open. But, you know, Bill was talking about that drought in the late 90s and early 2000s, and that probably didn't hit us quite as severe as it did him, but it was a multi-year drought. Each year just seemed like it got it wasn't something that you were just thrown into the middle of right away, but it just got persistently worse, it seemed like, through the years, and harder to manage through. But it kind of forced us, and that was kind of when I was coming back to the ranch too, but to really get serious about looking at grass elsewhere, maybe significantly further away from Melville than we'd planned on. But so my wife and I ended up moving down to Cody during that period and leased a ranch down there. And that made Melville not look nearly as dry. But you know, it opened up an opportunity for us, and we didn't buy cows to stock that ranch. We just took cows that were on this ranch and shifted them over to that place, and that's how we started. Between that and custom grazing on that ranch is how we got that opened up. So I don't think it was the only factor that caused us to move down there, but it certainly was an opportunity for my wife and I that happened to be in the middle of a pretty severe drought. But
I think can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think there's opportunity in it, and because it's a disruption, because of a disruption, you got the opportunity to either create an extreme disruption on a landscape if you can keep a class of cattle that can stand that, you know, like a set of dry cows or something. But then the other opportunity would be ranches. Some ranches are going to get destocked, but some people are going to decide not to restock. So I mean, it's an opportunity, I think, to find lease properties, something along those lines. And we kind of put that into our thought processes because we have so much a big percentage of leased ground in our operation that we can have a drought in a wet year if we lose a lease, you know. So I mean, it changes how we think of drought is in a lot of different ways, more so than just precipitation, I guess.
As far as opportunity in a drought, if you have those reserves, like Bill Milton said, you're able to maybe withstand it a year longer or maybe half a year longer than some of your neighbors. For us, in 02, we closed on some property because of the drought. We were able to keep our situation without having to destock. Neighbors didn't fare so well. We were able to buy. So, and that's currently where we're sitting right now, is on that piece of property. So yeah, there's opportunity in drought if you can be that person that can withstand it a little bit longer than somebody else.
I also think another opportunity in drought is it might force you to do some things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and try some things you wouldn't ordinarily try. When things are going well, people tend to just stay with the status quo and not push themselves as much, maybe. And I think when there's challenges like drought and like a lot of other challenges that we face in ranching, those are good for us because it pushes us to maybe think outside the box a little, try things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. And some of those things are successful and make all the difference in the world. So, yeah.
I think that's why Connie gets along with me so well. I challenge her.
He's challenging, yes. Is that what you say about unruly children? They're challenging.
Well, I would say that, in the last couple of months since I've been on these sessions, we've had a lot of new producers who are interested in the regenerative ag. And I do think one comment that all of you guys have brought up that I think is super important is, diversity in your enterprises. I think we kind of got to get away from the mother cow and thinking that that's all you can do, and kind of remember that there's other options. And I think for a lot of these new people, I think that's really important to understand. So thank you.
I think another really helpful thing is having a network of people, just a broad network of people that you can just call up on the phone, and it might just be talking about ideas, or a meeting like this, and it might be knowing somebody in an area that doesn't have drought, and you can just call them up and say, hey, how are things going there? Do you got any room for extra cattle, or do you know of any situations that are going on over there that might allow us to do something? But just continuing to build a network of people that you can talk to, I think, is paramount. I think those are opportunities that that just pop up, and I think the drought, like Roger said, it's a disruptor. I think that's a great way to think of it, and it might cause you to cross paths with people that you hadn't before, and it might open up opportunities down the road for you. There's things that just happen in disruptions that maybe come back years later, but.
So, I totally committed to that, broadening your network for creativity and ideas and even resources, certainly opportunities. And this is a great example, right now. But Connie and Craig know that we're, we have this conversation going with RSA and ACES, Winter ACES, about some kind of grass bank leasing concept, where groups of ranchers, it's mainly trying to find grass for young and transition or traditional ranchers, but there's no question we have a lot of absentee landowners that don't need their grass for the economics of why they own that land. And while I don't want any more of those than possible, the ones that are there that have, relatable values, developing relationships with those people, they could, over time create some significant grass bank opportunities where people could pull cattle and go onto those places. And I do think that opportunity exists. And then another one is
Natalie's walking that heifer. She hasn't cattle.
On the marketing thing, we struggle, but we got a few places we're doing, and Cooper Hibber seems to be doing a pretty good job with his cull cattle. If you are going to have to destock, if we could create some relationships where people could put together, aggregate cull cattle that could really fit a grass-fed program, and really make a business out of really trying to aggregate numbers that would have leverage selling into a particular grass-fed market. I really think that's an important thing to explore in the neighborhood. So when you do sell these animals, you know what that can be like in these auction markets. If it's a wreck in a broad way, it's really hard to get the money you want. So developing those alternative markets. But again, that's another example that preparing for this takes, some years. But there's no better time than the present. Start working on those. Yeah, and then I see Amy Seaman on, and so we've been working. I'll just throw this out. So, we've been working with Amy and Audubon to get certified with their bird friendly program, and I don't know if those guys are going to be able to market some of our cattle, but they seem to be willing to try, and they're doing it in some places, certainly down in Colorado. So I think some of us should be willing to explore working with non-traditional partners like that who sincerely seem to want to support the family rancher. And so if Amy and Audubon create a market for a truckload of cattle, I'll come back next year and say, this is a good drought management plan. So I don't know. Maybe you got those cows sold. Just joking.
Well, no, I do love this conversation because we have had talked enough that that I really am sort of enthralled with the potential of the Audubon network and how that could work. This is a fascinating conversation because I have not thought about it in per se only in a drought context or framework. So that is uniquely unique situation, but I think one where there is that opportunity if we can form those connections. There's 13 states across the West and into the Midwest primarily involved. So great networking opportunities, as you mentioned, for grass-fed program especially. This is a whole new way to wrap my head around it. I love this. Yeah.
So I have a quick question for everybody. When you do start thinking about destocking, what are some of you guys's priorities? What do you? I mean, we've talked about the yearlings, of course. That seems like the easiest age group to start with destocking. Then do you go with your old cows, or do you go with your 2-year-olds, middle age? What are some of the rest of you ideas on how to prioritize? And does it vary from year to year, depending on how stocked you are as a ranch? If I don't know, we need to sell a few pairs or cows this year, and we go back and forth with different ideas of which ones would be best to sell. Do we sell our old cows? Do we sell some of our 2-year-old pairs that we just don't think are going to perform? Do we sell some of our middle-aged cows that aren't performing like we'd like to see them? Any other thoughts on that?
Those are good questions. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's so many factors that are at play. Do you the 2-year-olds is an interesting idea. They're ones that are going to be worth more, but they might be ones that have more perceived value, and then like your short-term cows they're going to be kind of worth what they weigh, just kind of like the stockers. And the younger the cows get, there's more factors that at play there that what's the optimism of people out there for the economics of the cow-calf sector for the next 3 to 5 years, that those sorts of things, but then you have to weigh that with the idea that if you decide to keep all of them and then they're the ones that breed up the absolute worst, then you have to sell those opens for $700 less than what you thought they were going to be worth, then that hurts too. So I think there's a lot of factors at play. I think it depends on what your grass resources are, and if you're confident that you can get a 2-year-old rebred. I do think that just the easy ones maybe are the ones that you just don't really like for one reason or another. If they're starting to get anything that's crippled or a bad bag or anything like that are pretty easy. The early weaning is another thing that we've done where you can significantly change your number of stock days grazed by depending on when you wean. And So before we even go to start really making those tough decisions of which cow do I sell, it might be weaning a lot earlier. And that opens up grass to where maybe it just gives you more time to kind of think about it, look at the market and things like that, get preg tested. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts too, because this is a great question. I've often wondered, when it comes down to actually having to sell cows, which ones do you pick on first? So I'd love to hear other comments.
Maybe that's another one of the opportunities within a drought, is that if you are forced with these choices that you have to make, like you said, Wyatt, selling your poorer doers, or your ones with the bad bag, or the ones that maybe aren't just the cows you don't like, it gives you that extra push that you need to cull a little harder into your herd, and in the long run, really improve your herd. Maybe that's another opportunity.
Well, I would agree with that, Connie, because we changed our calving date to April 1st, and ever since we have, everything comes in bred. Doesn't matter if she's 15 years old, 20 years old. I mean, everything comes in bred. Well, then you always have issues. So you hate to sell that bred cow because she's going to have a calf, but at the same time, you probably end up losing more cows because of their age. So in a drought, an opportunity would be to, strengthen up your herd. And even if they are pregnant, I mean, you can't take that risk of keeping that old cow. So I think that's a great comment.
Sorry, we got a heifer calving too, and so Craig's gonna run. We've been watching her out the window the whole time, but she's disappeared on us, so he's gonna go check. She's one we've been a little worried about, so we're gonna go make sure she's all right.
We actually, it forced us to make some moves that we knew needed to happen, and then make some choices that we weren't sure about. We had probably, at least one semi-load of old cows that we were going to sell all along. But last fall, they were worth pennies. And so we decided, maybe we'd just calve them and sell them as pairs. But we sure weren't going to sell them for $450 a piece last fall or last winter. And so, and we also thought that we would have grass that we ended up not having. And so we ended up digging deeper. The old cows plus the not as old cows, we ended up selling 93 head last week for $1,000. And we didn't have much into them to get through the winter. Would I like to have kept some of them? Yeah, but that was a pretty easy decision. It's nice. We've younged things up a little bit again, and whether they had good bags or not, their days are numbered, right? So now she's hopefully not, she's not going to show up open or bad footed or stifled on our watch. She can go somewhere else. We are in the process of digging deeper, actually. Just listed our 8 and 9 year olds, be another 2 semi-loads of cows that we didn't necessarily want to sell, but it was between them and our yearlings. And where the yearlings are going to be, we've had issues with breed up and getting there early enough, because we calve in May. We weren't utilizing some of that grass in May that needed to be if we were going to get regrowth out of it and get back to it late fall. And so the yearlings will go there, and these old cows, these older cows will go down the road. And to be honest, the margins on them are similar enough that by reproducing, there's more turnover with the yearlings than the cows. So we can beat up on those cows a little bit just by sheer numbers with the yearlings. And it wasn't an easy call, because one of the reasons we got into stockers and feeding calves through the winter was that, oh yeah, well, they're our drought plan. That'll be the first thing to climb on a truck because they're the easiest thing to sell. But when you start running numbers on them and realizing that they maybe have more potential to make money for us, so then we kind of turn to the cows. The upside will be that we should have a pretty young cow herd by fall.
I think that's great. Just really being honest about the numbers and looking at it objectively and letting that kind of make your decision too. That's really important. The yearlings almost on a per head basis have been as profitable as the cows have for a couple of years now. And that's changed the way we've structured our enterprise mix a little bit. But yeah, that's a good point to look at the numbers.
A good thing to come out of this is we've struggled for a year and a half now as to what the balance of the producing cow and the yearling on the place needs to be. Because we were new to the yearling thing, we didn't know, what that enterprise balance needed to be. And this is kind of making that decision for us. And we did struggle a little bit with, well, maybe we sell those 4 and 5 year old cows because they're worth so much more. But then next year we have this big short-term cow problem again. And who knows whether they'll be worth anything in the fall again. And, so.
And with the yearlings, the water is a big.
Yeah, and those yearlings will be gone a little sooner, so hopefully we'll be able to stockpile some more grass to get through winter with cows and next year's set of calves. And also water quality. We struggle a little bit with water quality and catch dams. We're pumping out of the catch dams to drink out of, but just with lack of snow, that water situation is not as good as it has been in the past. So to be able to come out of there 45 days earlier than the cows would is a good thing. We hope. Because I think it'd be really difficult, and everybody's kind of touched on this, that this isn't a cookie cutter problem. And I don't think that on any given year you can use the same strategy that you used the last time you had a drought. Market scenarios change, and your past usage history changes. I can't imagine that you could just slap the same template over a drought situation every year and make it work.
So Betsy, can I put you on the spot? Do you guys have a drought plan? Just curious.
Theoretically, yes, not written down. Mostly it would be probably initially sending like our yearling bulls somewhere else to be fed. I mean, we prefer not to have them confined somewhere, but if we had to, we could. Or we've got a place here that we could do that with. That would be one plan, and the same with the heifers, I guess, too. Yeah, we'd prefer not to sell them, but we could. So we have it like it's all up here, just like everybody else. I was kind of curious, like the Ranching for Profit, that the grazing chart, the wall chart that, a lot of us have, but there's a place for moisture on there too. And I wondered if anybody uses that 12-month rolling average, like we're supposed to, to see, what.
We've had that use it for.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
We've started out with good intentions, Betsy, but we've never kept it going.
The moisture part, we haven't really excelled at the grazing part. We just kind of write it down, but the moisture part Roger has kept track of, and I couldn't tell you what it is right now, but it obviously is telling us that we're way less than we were for a couple of years. So, but yeah, I think that would be a really handy tool to kind of, plan as well. But But to answer your question, Connie, no, we really don't have that written down for sure.
Thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot. I just was really curious.
No, that's fine. Not a problem. We need to, though. It's been on our action plan a time or two, I believe.
Hey, Chelsea, I'm glad you guys were able to jump on. One question I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about written plans, is Wyatt shared that they've got something in writing and Bill's got some things in writing. And so I wanted to ask you guys if you could share those with me. And because I think it's worth having something in writing. It sounds like a lot of it's pretty creative and we all appreciate that. But Chelsea, do you guys keep much in writing in terms of drought planning?
Our biggest, we do track some rainfall through Maya. The biggest thing we have written down is classes of cattle, like order that we would destock if we had to destock. Custom grazers first, and then we go back and forth, to just get rid of the old cows. On our thinking on that was maybe getting rid of some, maybe your 2-year-olds as pairs. The stuff, they're your younger cows, but they do have more value. And also in a drought, they're the ones that may not get bred back as well either. So that's kind of a thought on destocking, I guess. But yeah, I guess it's just the kind of knowing that from past experience, I guess our biggest deal is destock sooner rather than later. That's what going forward, that's what we're looking at. Yeah.
So we try to, input the either on the written grazing plan or in the Maya so we can see that projection headed, downward, so we can be on the leading edge of it. But you know how it is, you start out with good intentions and then it's hard to keep that up sometimes. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I was just going to mention, for those of you that haven't been to Ranching for Profit, or this might be a new concept, basically it's just keeping a 12-month rolling total. So every month you drop one off and you add the new month. And so you basically have a 1-year total for rainfall always in front of you. And if you start to see that trending downward, it's a indicator that you might start preparing for drought or start thinking about those things. So.
That's a number that we've used in the past, is stock days per acre per inch of rainfall. And that's a pretty interesting one. So you kind of need to have that, the precip data. But that can get pretty out of line sometimes when things don't necessarily look that different on the ground yet, but it is kind of a leading indicator.
And what's the figure that you use for rainfall there? That 12-month total?
Yeah, and yeah, it would be. It would be. That's I think probably the best number to use. The timing of when you're grazing it, and how much residual you've got on a pasture that you're going into can kind of change it a little bit, but it can be a pretty good number. And we've keep records in fits and starts too. So right now we don't have very good data to work with. We should probably have better precip data in front of us, but yeah, it's actually on one of the ranches that we just grazed with stalker cattle. It's been pretty helpful because that ranch we're trying to do as good a job as we can of grazing that ranch in 120-day season, and so it's not anything like our ranch here in Melville or what Bill's talking about, where are we going to calve, and that's a decision that's made, probably 18 months out and setting things up for that. This ranch is in a little higher rainfall area, but we're really trying to get a pretty good graze on it in 120 days. And so just, a day or two here or there makes a bigger difference on that place. And so that's one that we've actually probably kept better track of the data than a lot of the other places. And we've used that number. And that's popped up a few times where it's like, wait, we're getting kind of out of line on our stock days per acre per inch of rainfall. And we got to think about maybe, and we, on that place, especially when we do that, then we go out and kind of look at what we're grazing too. And how does it look on the ground? I think nothing can replace on the ground, observation, but some of those numbers can kind of help you with your perspective a little bit, maybe.
I'd say if anybody has anything else to add, that'd be awesome. And if not, I mean, we can stay as long as you guys like, but I guess if you guys have to go and do your things, that's awesome. But yeah, we're here if you guys want to continue the debate. So.
I just wanted to thank everybody for getting on here tonight. This is always a lot of fun. I always learn so much just listening to everybody. We appreciate all the input, all the thoughts.
I would also say Andrew Berger. I really was hoping some of our people from up in the northern country here were on this call, because this has just been a wealth of information. So we'll definitely have to get together and maybe try to pass that along, because this is really good information. So.
Absolutely, Holly. Yeah, thanks. I did touch base with some folks who were planning to make it, and how things came up, but yeah, let's definitely do that and get some more information out of it however we can. Hope they'll be at the next one for sure.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for letting me sit in on this. I have much to learn about ranching, and this is really informative, and it's really good to hear a lot of different perspectives. So thank you again.
Sure. It's easier talking about drought when it's raining outside. It makes you feel a little more hopeful.
Yeah.
That's actually why we did it. We were hoping it would cause rain, and it did. So.
Are you getting any rain, Bill?
A little bit, yeah. Got probably a quarter-inch last night, and it's sort of been off and on. Not a lot, but it just feels good to be damp and cloudy and cool. So yeah, we love it.
Guys can just push some of that on up our way. We haven't had any yet.
Oh yeah,
Coming, right?
We'll do our best, Connie. Yeah, I think you guys can get some.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. I think we'll go ahead and sign off unless last call for questions or comments.
Ian, are you guys getting any moisture up there?
It has been damp. I would say that in the last sort of 48 hours, we're, I don't know, 3,500s or so. And then the previous days, I think we've a little hard to measure, but I would say we've gotten another maybe 4/10 worth of snow moisture. So
No runoff for the reservoirs though.
Bet not.
but well, it'll grow for a little while. Still pretty cool though. How's everybody else? What about Big Timber Nut Country? Is it getting anything?
Yeah, we're doing pretty good actually now. We got about 8 inches of snow last Sunday night, and then started picking up a little bit a couple days ago, and then actually last night it rained, so it stayed warm enough to rain. That was really nice. So it was pretty muddy this morning, and then here this afternoon it's kind of just settled in and started raining pretty steady. So I think we're a little over an inch in this past week of precip. So I know that Connie's probably going to start throwing stuff at me now, but
Maybe I'll just move down there. Or hey, I've got some cattle. What do you want to? I've got some cattle. Find a wetter place to live.
You're going to be getting instant messages, Wyatt, after this is over.
This might get us back to actually being able to run a few more closer to what we were planning on, but there's other places that we run cattle that are still really dry, so we're just kind of reshuffling the deck.
Well, it didn't freeze the first time in quite a while, and it was noticeably greener by mid-afternoon today, just having not frozen last night.
Yeah, that made a big difference.
So Wyatt, with an inch of rain, can you calculate in your head how many animal days you picked up? How many animal days you'll create with that inch of rain?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't know. It's been good. I mean, yeah, it's going to give the grass a really good start. I don't think it's not a drought buster or anything. And I think we're pretty wise to try to kind of keep being pretty cautious as we go forward here. Cause right now, I mean, we're just like, it's not like, we tapped a lot of our subsoil moisture last year. And so, I mean, this is giving the grass a good start, but it's not significantly changing things yet to where feel like we've got a little more of a cushion. I think we're still just kind of one rain away, it feels like. Especially if we keep getting this wind, we'll get a little bit of moisture and then 3 weeks of cold wind, which seems to suck it all out. We thought we were going into the winter with really good soil moisture because we had a pretty wet October, but we dug some holes here a couple weeks ago and there wasn't nearly the moisture there that we thought there might be.
So why do you think, or even I would ask Ingerlands as well, not that familiar with some of the other places, maybe Alex, like, you think you are capturing, when you get that inch, do you think you're doing a better job holding that moisture in because of what you've done over the last 10 years than you would 10 years ago? I mean, can you measurably feel that you're going to use that inch better than you would because of what you've been doing?
We don't see any muddy runoff, that's for sure. But, we're in pretty grassy country too. So it's, I think for as long as I can remember, we've always, I think, felt like we were capturing most of what we got. I mean, it takes just between, the amount of grass and the amount of gravel that's under the grass. We don't get a ton of runoff like maybe areas that have a lot more clay soil. I mean, the east end of our ranch is more clay, I guess. But yeah, I think just the ground cover, we managing for ground cover and residual is huge in capturing in making the best use of the moisture that you do get. And I think, you know, like, try to not, you know, we don't want drought to be an excuse for bad management. What we don't want is, we don't want to have to say, when we do start getting moisture, well, this is going to be, we're going to have, you know, 2 or 3 years of recovery here. Now, what we want is to be in a position as to where when we get the moisture, we're going, you know, and it's, we're making good use of it, and we don't have to go through a cycle of, you know, a lot of maybe annual weeds that are just there to cover bare ground, or cheatgrass issues. You know, we don't want to get ourselves in that situation. So I think, yeah, the grazing that has been done over the years has helped that. There's been a few lease places we've been on where I've seen that effect, where it took, you know, a couple of years of decent moisture to kind of get things looking good again. And that's amazing how much that sets you back, having those recovery years when they could be years that you were making a lot better use of the moisture you were getting.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how we measure this as we all do our own little things about trying to figure out how we capture, you know, that we could actually say, yeah, the cause and effect of our grazing is actually allowing us to hold, not only capture, but to hold moisture longer. I'm curious, you know, I mean, it is 8:30, but, you know, the Interlands and Frenches, do you feel like you're doing a better job? And what makes you feel that way?
I think we are, don't you, Mark? You kind of missed part of the question, I think,
Yeah.
but
I'm pretty sure we're getting a little better, you know, but
we have documented some infiltration rates.
yeah,
in the past,
infiltration
so
rates
have
are
increased.
definitely improved.
But yeah, when it, you know, and barring a huge rainstorm like we had a couple of years ago, like 6 inches in August, we didn't get all of that by any means. But I kind of feel like, you know, these rain events are, so they're most of it's going in, I think.
Well, I think so.
And I think it's better than it used to be, you know, 4 or 5, 6 years ago.
Definitely.
Right.
I think we have a long ways to go. I think the biggest change we've seen so far is just our mindset, and so that was the first big change, and now getting the change in the land, and the response to rainfall and that kind of thing, just like Wyatt was talking at Interlands. I think that's yet to be seen. I hope that we're making a difference, and I think we must be some, but I do think we're just getting started, and we've got a long ways to go.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think the biggest thing that, from a mindset perspective, that we've kind of got to is, and I think it's been kind of over time born out of necessity, but so with a lot of leased ground, as a hedge against that, we tend to think that we should have a lot of standing forage. Like, and our target is roughly around the end of June. For the most part, our growing season is done by the end of June. But at the end of June, I'd like to think that we have 18 months worth of feed available. And so that just builds in a reserve, I think. That is partly more maybe of a business plan than it is a drought plan. But I think there is a side benefit to that. And I think that is a little extra layer of cover that we weren't historically used to thinking about. So I think that helps, but we can't quantify that. So.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, we got to work on that. So but I mean, I just couldn't imagine. I know that people had hoppers, and we had some hoppers too. That if you were waiting for grass to grow to eat this year, you know, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't. doesn't work.
Yeah, I think the residual is a huge thing, and just having a grass bank, I mean, that's just having that out in front of you. And that's, whether it's 18 months or getting down there less than that or more than that, it's gonna vary, but always having some out in front of you is a good plan.
We thought that there should be a place on your balance sheet for that standing forage. I mean,
They let you put hay on there,
Yeah,
but not
he's gonna-
standing for it. I don't understand that.
It's a good point. It's something that's just as critical as any other asset that we've got. Yeah.
maybe I'll sneak that in there in one of these reports to see if I get a reaction from a banker.
We're gonna run, folks. Thank you.
Good to see you, Ian.
Yeah, take care.
Take care, Ian.
See you later.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
You bet.
I'm gonna sign off too, guys. Good night. Good to see y'all.
Thanks, Connie.
Good to see you, Connie.
Yeah, take care, you guys. Great to see everyone.
You guys.
Good night.
Good night, all. Take care.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again. And I was wondering if I had to be a rancher to get on the email list, because I would love to be a fly on the wall for these conversations. Really appreciate
No, definitely. What's your address?
it. It is P.E. Dudley, that's D-U-D-L-E-Y. So P-E-D-U-D-L-E-Y 13@gmail.com. I could type it in the chat too.
I got it. It's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for hosting, and catch you next time, I guess.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Next
good,
month.
Peter. Thank you. Well, that worked out good. I had to step away for a minute, but I guess,
No, I thought that was pretty good. I was happy, I think.
yeah. Yeah.
Megan said that conversation has gone on before, and for some reason they just love talking about drought.
Yeah. Yeah. She gets annoyed sometimes and she'll just cut it off. Like, okay, we got to respect people's time. And it's like, oh,
Yeah,
a lot of times they're stuck on the ranch. They don't get to visit with people.
right. When she was texting me that, it's respectful, be respectful, and I'm like, I'm just gonna let it go. But she did have actually a pretty good idea. And I see Alex Blake is probably not around his computer, but she said he went on a US regenerative tour.
Yeah.
So maybe would he be interested possibly in maybe talking to the group about that maybe?
That's a great idea. Yeah. I think he'd love to give kind of a recap and talk about the different places they saw and the things they learned. That'd be good for the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, because I did tell Cooper that we'd maybe get him on another one, but maybe this the tour one would be maybe a little bit, more timely or something. And always come back. We can always come back with Cooper's mineral topic.
Yeah.
But
Well, and Alex did text me on the side and said he'd really like to get this same group of people back together in a couple months to see, just as a check-in, like, okay, we talked about this in April, where's everybody at now?
right. No, that would be a great idea, especially with the year that we're having. It's just very volatile. And yeah, that'd be a good idea for sure.
Well, and I think that's why people like talking about it, because drought is just a dirty word that's always in the back of your mind. Like,
Right.
it's almost a psychology session.
Yeah. 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 Helps to talk it out. Exactly. Yeah. No, and I don't know how you get that grass-fed network or whatever together, but I think that's a great idea. Because like we had people up here looking to take in cows, but if you were, talking with people that raise their cows the same, we would love to, if we had an opportunity to buy cows that have already been doing this system, because then it's just so much easier to integrate them in. So I think that would be a great network. And I mean, we have what, 80 some names, and I'm sure a lot of those people would be more than happy to be on it. I don't know how you go about doing that, but
Well, sleep on it and let's talk about what the first step is tomorrow. And
kind of like a Craigslist for grass fed, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And we could set that up right through Airtable.
Oh, okay.
I'll bet.
All right.
I'll bet that it could be set up for that. Yeah.
And they can just post an ad and it just goes to the group.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll let you go.
Sounds good. I hope it's too much of your son's birthday.
Oh, everybody's sleeping. I think prom was Saturday night. So yeah, I should be sleeping too.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk tomorrow, I'm sure.
Okay. Sounds
All right.
good. Thanks
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
All right. Bye.